Hello, everyone. So this is your task for week 4, your CAD task for week 4, and it looks cool. It's a spacecraft type of futuristic vessel, but the learning behind it is kind of on two levels. First of all, it's about creating bodies like this and creating parts like this in SolidWorks and the different features that you can use and techniques that you can use to do so. And also, kind of in reverse, then, the importance of deconstructing, let's say, a product or a part or something that you want to model in SolidWorks into geometry. And you can see here, if I just expose the sketches that have been used to create the body of this part, you can see that it's all made up of, essentially, I think it's nine sketches. Yeah, 9 individual sketches create this whole thing. Right, and each of them are attributed directly to the fuselage, wing, or engine, and these little kind of jets that come out the back of the engine. And it's all about understanding it in 2 dimensions and understanding the 2-dimensional geometric makeup of it to be able to create it in 3 dimensions and to apply the appropriate features and so on. So I'll just hide these as a reference point, and we'll get into making this then. I'm going to try and be as precise and as straight to the point in my directions as to how to create the part, so that you can pause and just catch up on me saying a few words about it. But there will be places in between where I'll break into some explanations and pointing out certain aspects that are important. So I'm going to open up a new part. So I'll open up a new part, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on the top plane. So I'm going to sketch. I'm going to draw a line on the top plane, and I'm going to draw it vertically from the origin. It's very important, as always with these, it's very important for you to be considerate of where the origin is in your part. And for this particular sketch, I want to start my line at the origin, then I want to come down vertically, and I want to make this line 1,525 millimeters. I'm going to exit this sketch. I'm going to stay in this view, and I'm going to sketch on the top plane again. This time I'm going to draw in another vertical line down like this. Doesn't matter the length of it just yet. And I want to hover over this line. And hover over this line allows me to create an arc that comes out of the end of that line, from the last point that I drew of that line, an arc that is tangential to it. All right, so it's maintaining tangency to this line. And I'm going to create this arc such that the end point that I draw is on the end point of that line that I've just drawn a second ago. I'm going to add in a couple of dimensions. So I'm going to make the distance from these 2 lines 105 millimeters. I'm also going to make the distance from this point on my arc to this point on my arc vertically, as we view it, 610 millimeters. And you can see that for the most part my sketch is fully defined because it's turned black, but this point up here is not fully defined. It's still able to go vertically. So I'm going to select that point. I'm going to select my origin, which is also the end point of my line, which is more so important, my other line, and I'm going to make it horizontal. So now nothing about this is underdefined. In fact, I've got a little check down here that I can do, which is to say that this is now fully defined. So I'm going to exit this sketch, and I'm going to sketch on the right plane. So I'm going to open a sketch in the right plane. I'm going to hit my space bar, and I will go normal to this plane. Now, I want to draw this in sections. If I draw it all at once, then it can kind of get a bit messy. So I'm going to draw in a horizontal line here first. And this horizontal line is 61 millimeters from the line that I've already drawn previously on the top plane. I want to make this end point of my line vertical with my origin. And I don't have a dimension for this just yet. What I want to do next is I want to select 3-point arc. So go to the drop-down menu for the center point arc and select 3-point arc. I want to put one end point of my arc here on this line that I've just drawn, and I want the curvature to go around like this. So I want it to be like that. And I'll put the other end point here for now, and that's okay for now. And then I'll draw in another arc, which is like this, and I want the curvature to go this way. So I'm going to put my last click above those 2 points that I've just made. Now I want to add in a couple of relations. So I want to add in a relation between the line and the first arc that I drew. And I'm going to make those tangential. And I'm going to make these 2 arcs that I just drew tangential as well. So select them both and make them tangential. All right, so now that is defined by the relationships, but it's not still set in place. I actually want to make both of these arcs equal, which will make the radii of these arcs equal. So I'm going to make that equal. I'm going to dimension this arc, which will also dimension the other arc, to have a radius of 762 millimeters. And I'm going to just drag this back down in place so it's workable for me. And I'm going to insert another 3-point arc. So I'm going to start off by selecting the start point of my 3-point arc to be the end point of my previous arc that I drew. And I'm going to rotate just a little bit so I can select this very end point here. It might be just my machine, but it doesn't let me select that point when I'm looking normal to the right plane. And then once I've drawn that in, I'm going to select those 2 arcs and I'm going to make those tangential. All right. Now, there's another relationship that I can add in here, or really a dimension that will define this for me. And that is this point, which is the intersection of the arc that I just drew to the arc that I drew before that. And the distance from that point to this line here that I drew in the top plane previously is 152 millimeters. And the distance from that point again to my last point of my last arc horizontally is 762 millimeters. And there's something else that I should add in here, I think, because this should be defined now. Let's see here. Oh yes, this needs to get a radius attached to it. So I'm going to dimension this arc to be 1525. Sorry, I'm referencing notes beside me. And now it's fully defined. Okay, so that's a fully defined sketch. We can work with that. What I've essentially drawn there is kind of, you can start to see the fuselage come together. So kind of the outermost extreme points and also the path in which we're going to bring along a particular profile. And I'm going to draw that profile now. And because I positioned my initial sketch such that this line starts at the origin point and then it comes down vertically on my top plane, it means that my front plane is actually here. It's actually where those points all start. So when I sketch it, it's very useful for my sweep function. So I'm going to sketch on the front plane and I'm going to hit my spacebar again and I'm going to go normal to that. And I'm going to draw in a partial ellipse. Okay, so I'm going to draw in a partial ellipse here and I'm going to select this. So I need to come around here just to get a better view of it. These lines are obscuring my view of it in that position. So I'll try and get an isometric of it almost. So I'll select this as origin as my center point of my ellipse. And then I go up to the top end point and then I'm going to bring it out here. Here, might need to wiggle around the view a little bit to be able to actually attach to that and relate to that. And you'll start drawing from here because that's the place you clicked last. And if it starts drawing in the wrong direction, like down here, then just go across it like this a couple of times and it will start to draw in the correct direction. So bring it around to here and you'll see once I draw that it's still not fully defined. All right, it's still able to move like that. So I want to make a relationship between that endpoint and my origin such that it makes them horizontal. And now it's fully defined. Now, still within that sketch, I want to draw in another partial ellipse. And I want to draw in my other partial ellipse by, let's see, drawing just down vertically first. And then I want to draw in the starting point at which I'm going to draw in this partial ellipse over here where I ended, or even started my previous one, and where I ended my previous one as well. All right. Now, what is not defined about this yet is the position of this that I can define straight away. I want this to be vertically underneath my origin. So there it is. Okay, so that's right underneath my origin. Now I want to create a construction. So I want to add in a center line, which is deemed to be construction geometry, which won't impact my sweep function when I try and do that in just a moment. And I'm going to draw that in between this line here on my partial ellipse that I just drew and the origin. And that will be vertical because they're vertical between each other anyway. I'm also going to draw in another center line between the endpoint of that line I just drew and the endpoint of the first partial ellipse that I drew. And you can see that as we already noted, this is not defined. So I'm going to add in a dimension here to say that this is actually 60 degrees. All right. So that is 60 degrees. Okay. So that is now my profile. What I want to do now is I want to engage in a swept boss base function. So it sweeps a closed profile along an open or closed path to create a solid feature. Okay. So I'm going to sweep this as my profile. You can see it's even telling me this is your profile. This is the profile you want. And this is the path that I want. So click on this, and this is my path. Now, this does not look like the spacecraft that I showed you at the start. And that's because we need to use these other curves and these other sketch geometries that we've created on the front plane, or on the right plane, and on the top plane. So I'm going to select guide curves down here on the left-hand side in my feature manager or property manager, and make sure that this box here is highlighted. I'm going to select this curve, and I'm also going to select this curve here. All right. I'm going to ensure that this merge smooth faces checkbox is ticked. And also in options, I want to merge tangent faces. Doesn't make too much of a difference here, but in certain sketches and in certain features for sweeps, it can introduce lines that you don't want to be there. You want it to be smooth. So when I say OK to this, so I click my green tick box, then that will have my sweep in this view now. So it's perfect. Okay. That is all good there for the fuselage. So that's the fuselage complete. The next thing that I want to do is I want to draw in the wing, and I'm going to sketch on the right plane. So go into sketch. I'm going to try and get an isometric of it here so I can work with it a little bit better. I'm going to draw in a line anywhere first. All right. I'm going to draw in a line anywhere. And I've just drawn on the right plane. Sorry. I don't want to draw on the right plane. I want to draw on the top plane. Sorry. I draw on the right plane last. So I want to draw on the top plane, and I want to draw in a line just anywhere first. That's fine with me. I'm going to add in a dimension such that, let's see, such that this line is how many millimeters away? 518 millimeters away from my origin. And it's still able to move around like this, which I don't really want. So I'm going to say that I want to highlight this endpoint here and highlight my origin and say that these are vertical to one another. All right. So now all that this will do is it will go like this. Oh yeah, sorry. I want to make this line also horizontal itself. All right. So this can't move now, but my endpoint can, because it's not defined yet as to where this stops. All right. So this can move in and out. So I'm going to add in a dimension to my end line, which is 365, or my line that I've just drawn, which is 365, and hit enter, and that's okay. I'm going to exit the sketch, and I'm going to start a new sketch on the top plane. I'm going to start by clicking sketch just to show you something that you might not have seen before. Say that I want to create a sketch. SolidWorks doesn't know where you want to create it, so you have to open up this here and select the top plane. I'm going to draw in a line which is going out in this direction. And I'm going to make this endpoint of this line to be vertical with the endpoint of this line, which is important. Now this will only move, let's say, back at 30 degrees like this as I see it. It's actually just moving back vertically. What will define that is me including a dimension between these 2 points, which is 152. And now that's defined, right? And I exit that sketch. Now I draw on my right plane. So now I'm going to enter a sketch on my right plane. And I'm going to draw in a line between these endpoints of my lines that I've just drawn. And I'm also going to draw in 2 other lines, which are vertical. So I want to see below my rubber on my pencil. It'll show better on your screen because my resolution on my laptop kind of makes things appear different. But on your screen, the yellow will be much clearer. If I move it, you can actually just see it for a second. A yellow, let's say, vertical relationship is what it's showing there. If it's yellow, that means once you draw it, it will lock in that relationship. If it's out in some other direction and it's white, then it won't lock it in, but it will be drawn in that relationship. It just won't maintain that if you were to move the sketch. And again, I'm going to draw in another vertical line over here. I'm going to make both of those lines that I just drew in, those vertical lines, I'm going to make those equal. And I'm going to click Smart Dimension and go 27.5. And that's my dimension for the height of those lines. I also want to include a midpoint, or sorry, a 3-point arc like we've used before. And I want to use both of the upper endpoints of those lines, of those vertical lines, as the endpoints of my midpoint arc. And now I want to add in an actual point. So this point here on the midpoint of that arc, it'll show it's on the midpoint, and that's a midpoint relationship there. See that? And I want to dimension that point as being how far? 35 millimeters above that horizontal line that I drew previously. And I'm going to exit that sketch. Now I'm going to go into features and swept boss space again. And this is my profile. And this is my path. And this is my guide curve. All right. And I'm going to say okay to that. All right. That's good. There's actually one thing that I want to do with that. It's easy to forget these options. Merge result. I do not want to merge the result. All right. I don't want to merge the result. And it's important that I don't merge the result, because when I want to operate a mirror function later on, it doesn't allow me to mirror this as a body, which is what we need to do. Let's see, because if I were to merge the result, then the feature that I'm creating right now and the fuselage that I've just created will be seen as the one body. And the reason that I want to mirror them as bodies is because features, swept features that are created like this with guide curves are not possible to be mirrored. You can't mirror them. All right, so that's the issue with that. You have to use geometric pattern to do that. All right, so this is just better and a more straightforward way to do it from here. Okay, so I'm not merging the result in that this is its own body. All right, this is its own body. So if you look up here, I've got two solid bodies. I've got my first sweep, which is my fuselage, and I've got my second sweep, which is my wing. And if you wanted to just, as you're part modeling, and it might get more complex for the types of parts that you create, but I can double click or click and then wait and then click again on my first sweep and say that this is fuselage. And I can click and click again on my second sweep and say that this is wing. All right, and that just makes it easy for me to like identify what these sweeps are. If I can't remember what I did first or second, you're almost trying to remember which order you're in and select through them to try and find which one it was. Now you just go over here and you see, okay, I want to open up my sketches for my wing. And there you go, you've got it. Okay, so next what I want to do is I want to insert a fillet. And I want to insert two fillets. There's going to be one fillet that's going to be on the leading edge of my wing. And it's going to be a symmetrical radius. So it's going to be a constant size fillet on that edge. And it will be 91.5 millimeters. And I'll click on the green tick for that. And I want to insert another fillet on the trailing edge, which will be 160 millimeters. It will have saved the properties of the fillet from before, so you can just use that. All right, so now that looks a bit more like a wing straight away. Right, so next we want to put in the sketch for the engine of our spaceship. So what I want to do is I want to click on this edge of this face of my wing that I've just created, just the edge that I've created the fillets on here. I'm going to click on this, I'm going to hit a sketch, and then I'm going to hit my space bar, go normal 2. It's popping up on my other window now because this part of the video is being recorded at a different time to the other part. So yeah, so normal 2. And now for this, I was going to show you arcs and put in a bunch of different arcs, make them tangential. But I think you've already kind of got the concept of that with the sketch that was used for this guide curve on the fuselage of the spaceship. So we're not going to do that. We're going to use spline. And spline is much more useful here, primarily because it's just a different function. And educationally, it's got much more of a valid use within this. So I want to first of all put in actually a center line, which is construction geometry. It won't affect our revolve. And I'm going to make my center line collinear with this bottom edge of this end of my wing. And I'm going to put in my spline, let's say. So I'm going to use this spline, this default spline. There's also this style spline, which is really like the spline that I showed you in the creation of the Tynant water bottle in the lecture last week, or the week before last week. So it was week 2 when I showed you the Tynant water bottle by Ross Lovegrove. Similar principle. Obviously, this is still a 2D one. That's a 3D NURBS spline, or let's say surface geometry. But this is going to be just the default normal spline that we've got in SolidWorks. And I'm going to put the first point on the end point of this center line. I'm going to click the next point maybe around here, and then the last point up here somewhere. And now I'm going to I could keep clicking forever. But now when I put in that last point, I want to hit escape, and then I want to start putting in some, let's say, constraints onto this spline. So I'm going to click the endpoint that I first drew, and this dot here on the very end of this, I can drag that and I can change how my spline looks. So I want to get that, and I want to make that vertical first. So I'm going to click on that very end dot. 2 seconds, need to zoom in a bit more. Maybe this. Okay, so I'm clicking on this dot here. Sometimes it's that dot. But anyway, this diamond shaped dot here, I'm going to make that vertical. And then you can see that this is actually having quite an impact on this here. So I'm actually going to drag that back a bit. You can see how it relaxes its constraint there. Here like this. And I might move this just a little bit up here. And actually, proportionally, I'm not too happy with that right now. With the spline, usually you're doing it in somewhat of a, let's say, fixed, or let's say narrow constraints generally. But here, we just want to go by eye just a little bit first. And I want to move that there like that. So I'm going to click on that again. Yeah, you see with this one now, it's working with this here. So I want this to be horizontal for this particular guide here. I want that to be horizontal. Okay, there. I actually want to move this whole thing back a bit, but to do that, maybe I might put in a dimension first to say that this here is 350 back from this, and then I'll say that it is 100 above it. Okay, and I'll move it somewhere where it looks somewhat smooth. Still, you can see that there's a bit of smoothness being taken away by this being out too much. If I brought this out too much, you can see that lip there isn't something that we want. Or maybe it is. I don't know. You can kind of freestyle this yourself and kind of enjoy it however you wish yourselves. Now I might just put in some construction geometry here and here and make this a triangle. Use some triangulation to make this work, so that when I move the whole thing, it's actually going to work for me. So I'll make certain dimensions here, and I might just add in this dimension to this one down here to make this 360. Oh, it's driven. Okay, we'll leave that there like that. And then this one here, I'll leave that at that dimension, and I'll leave that at this dimension. I'm just kind of using this in a way now that will allow me to move my spline because it's defined by those lines now. See that it's moving now with me. It's just basically putting in a support system that point in the center here will move along with it. Not too relevant to you. If you wanted to get it right from the start, then that would work too. So I'm going to move this around here. I might just dimension a certain distance away from the edge back here and say that I want this to be 280 away from that edge. And now you can see my spline is actually fully defined, even though these particular kind of guide lines here are not, which they never really are with splines, but that's okay. And then I can just bring out a line to this. Maybe I might put in an arc back to this. I might go here like this and make it here like this, and then select the arc, select the spline, and say that I'm going to make these tangential so that there's a kind of an even flow to them. I'm going to delete that relationship that was added in unintentionally before this. So there, I'm going to have this arc around there, and then I'm going to have another arc, which is now going to be purely a visual kind of thing for the nature of my kind of flame that's coming out the back of it. All right, and I'm going to make this out here like this, go like that. And I want it to actually go out quite a bit out the back. And I want this to be tangential to my construction line there. And I want this to be coincident with my construction line. So now when I pull it out, it's not going to go beyond that. And when I rotate it, it's going to look a lot better. And now proportionally, just getting a look at it, like here, it looks good to me. And now I just want to finish this up by closing out this revolve to have a line there like that. So when I go into features now and I go revolve boss base, and this is my, let's say this is my axis, it will show me that there. And I actually like the look of that Okay, that looks kind of somewhat like an actual engine. Usually there's an inlet as well, and this might compensate for that, but it looks good enough to me. All right, I might just make it a little longer because this geometry here doesn't kind of sit well with me. It doesn't make too much sense to me. So I might go in and edit the sketch and say, okay, I want this distance to be 370. Okay, so that's not working. I don't want to mess with it too much. Let's see. I'll drag this out here. I'll drag this out here. There we go. I'll make this a bit smaller. I might make these tangential actually. That makes flow better between each other. Make this a bit smaller. Again, I'm just doing this somewhat just freehand, trying to figure it out. And now I'm going to exit sketch and see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks a lot better. That looks a lot better. Okay. So that is, let's say, my engine. And you can, again, do whatever design you want on this yourself to make it look however way you want to make it look. Okay, so that's done. The next thing that we are going to do is I am going to engage in a mirror function. So I'm going to choose my right plane as my mirror facer plane. So I go into features, go into mirror, and I'm going to mirror my bodies. So I'm going to mirror this body here. And that's why we chose to not merge result earlier on. So that we can mirror them as bodies, because if we merge them as features, this particular type of geometry here where you use a sweep with guide curves, mirror does not merge or does not create a mirror of that particular feature unless it uses geometric pattern or geometry pattern, which we don't want. All right, I'm going to merge these solids and then say okay. All right, so now you can see even here that this is a separate body to this. You can see that. You can't see these lines of intersection between them. So what we want to do here is we want to go into our insert features, and then we want to go into combine. All right, it's not a commonly used one, but it is here when you do need it. So go into combine. So bodies to combine. So I clicked on merge earlier on during the mirror function. So it made all of this to one body. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click on the fuselage, and I want to add them. Make sure it's added. And I'm going to say combine. So now you can see this line of intersection between the two that exist here. All right, which is useful. Now what do I want to do? Okay, so I want to I want to insert a feature here now, or a fillet. So I'm going to click on this, and when I click on it, I'm going to have this option here. I can have this option that loops around, that also includes this here, but it only does so when I click on it. So I'm going to click on that, and I want to loop around, and I'm going to actually do this somewhat by eye, see what looks best to make them kind of somewhat merge into each other in a real nice way. I'm going to say okay to that dimension there. Okay, I'm going to copy that on the other side. I could have actually done this before I mirrored. Probably should have, but that's okay. And I'm going to also use this to create this feature here and say okay. All right, and now we can see that there's a nice smooth transition, which is also something that fillets are really good for. A smooth transition between one body to the next body, especially on some, let's say, aesthetically pleasing artifacts. Fillets can be quite useful for that. Now I want to create a fillet along this edge here. So I'm going to say fillet, and I'm going to click on this, and again the loop, and I'm going to actually increase the fillet here until it just hits a point to around here. So the point should be just here. I'm also going to engage with including this fillet here as a loop. I'm going to say yes to that. And now we see, again, it looks far more spaceshipy, let's say. All right. So this is now much more of a smooth transition between bodies, and it's a much more appropriate use of our features. Okay. So I'm happy with that. Next thing that I want to do is I want to engage in just a final piece, which is to create a sketch back here and the very rear of my my piece. I'm going to hit sketch. I'm going to sketch on this face. I've already went normal to it, the very end face. I'm going to click on my ellipse, since this was already an ellipse essentially here. I'm going to click on it there. I'm going to insert a line here along my minor axis. I'm going to trim this side of my ellipse out. I'm going to make sure that it's fixed to that. And now I'm going to create a revolved boss base. So I'm going to revolve this around that. Okay. And now that is my spaceship essentially there. Now there is, let's say there is another little trick that we can do here, which is that I can go here. I can sketch on my top plane. Sketch. And I can create an ellipse that's around the center here like this. And here I might just bring it back here a touch. I'll make these points vertical to one another. The very end points of my major axis like this. I might bring in this just a little bit till it's on my actual side of my piece. There we go. All right, so I'll just relate them however I wish. You'll see in a second that this doesn't matter a great deal. I'm going to go exit sketch. I'm going to go into features, curves, and then I'm going to click on split line. And then I've already clicked or used the sketch as my selection point because I was already clicked on it when I went into split line. And now the face, which is essentially the surface that I'm going to project the split line onto, is here. Okay, I'm going to project, and I'm going to say okay to that. And what that has done now is it has actually split this surface into one surface and this into another surface. And it's quite useful when we're going to add in some appearances. And what I want to do to add in appearances, I want to actually go into my model first. And I might change my appearance here to my jet being almost fully white, or maybe just a bit gray. But I go into white and just have this view of it here. So I might just make it fully white. Yeah, I'll make it fully white, and then I will say okay to that. And now I will click on this face here and I click on appearances. And for that face, I want to make it black. Say okay. And now for these, let's say rear outlets, which are essentially supposed to be indicative of the jets coming out the back, I'm going to click on that. I'm going to say I want this to be, sorry, because of my resolution that I switched between my laptop and my monitor, these sometimes are hidden. I'm going to go into appearances, and I'm going to go into lights, and I'm going to go into neon tube, and I'm going to drag over my neon tube here, and I'm going to click on the face. So it's going to be just my face. I'm going to click on the face in here then, and also this face. But actually what I want to do with this is another cool feature that I forgot about. I'll click on what I just added an appearance to, and I'll say I want to copy that appearance. And I'm going to click on here and paste it. Sorry. Once I paste it, I need to choose what I want to paste it to, which is the face. Click on this. I want to paste face. And I want to paste to the face. All right. Now what do I want to do? I want to change in this to be a plain white scene. All right. So now this is our jet. Now you'll see that it kind of looks a bit cartoonish at the moment. So if you want to increase the, let's say, appearance of it or improve the appearance of it, then what I would say you can do is change it to be a shaded display like this. Now my plain white background is kind of getting in my way there. So now it looks a lot nicer. It looks a lot smoother. You can't see the lines that are, let's say, in between this surface and this surface, for example. All right. So this looks a lot better. I will add in some settings to lights that you can hit over here, which will get you to click on this button over here and some lights, and you're going to delete these and add in your own in Brightspace. But there's no point in me going through that here when it's just essentially adding in some numbers. But yeah, this is essentially how to model your jet. The significance of the geometry is important, but overall it's quite a nice piece to create. Looking at it now, I think I'd change the engines just a little bit, but yeah, you can figure that out yourself. The principles are all there, and you can see that you can get a nice fluid design with some of the features that I created. Also possible to do this with surfaces, which is also useful too, but we just did it with features today. Okay, thanks.